الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد, sisters and brothers in Iman, Assalamu alaikum. We started the Tafsir program last evening. The surah that we have selected for the 14 nights that I'm here is Suratul Mulk. We looked at the first ayat of this surah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by saying, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Tabarakalladhi biyadihi al-mulk wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Blessed is he who has absolute control on the kingdom and he has power over everything. Before going on to the next ayat, I had left a question that the ayat ends with the words وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. We recite this in many du'as, in qunut also. And the question comes up, as soon as we say as believers that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can do everything, those who do not believe, they ridicule us and they say, okay, we have a question for you. And they have different kinds of questions where they say, can God create another God if He can do everything? Or can God create a rock that He cannot lift? Now, sometimes, if you don't think about it, when you are put that question, all of a sudden, it takes you by surprise and you are lost there. You don't know what to respond. It's not something really to worry about. These are very old issues in Islamic philosophy which have been discussed. But very briefly, I'll go through it. That when we talk about this concept and such questions, وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, and the questions such as, can God create another God? We had to realize, and I'm trying to stay away from technical terms used in Islamic philosophy. We have to understand this kinds of questions. There are three important ideas to keep in mind. We divide the concept, the relationship of the idea to the reality into three. We have wajib al-wujud, mumkin al-wujud, mumtani' al-wujud. But don't worry, we're not going to go through those terms. Wajib al-wujud means an idea which is there, which always should be there. It's a necessary existence. Wajib means necessary, wujud means existence. And this is used for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can't think of God in a time where He was not there, because time itself is creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is no beginning to the concept of God. God is eternal. He was there from before, He will be there forever. Then we have two other terms which are very important to understand and answer this question. Can God create another question? And that is the issue of possible and impossible. For a moment, think about somebody. We just use the name Sayyid here. Close your eyes, think of a person who is not here. And, just think of him riding a horse on Kennedy Road, the street on the side here. Now, look at that idea in your mind and try to relate it to the reality outside. Is it possible or is it impossible? It is within the realm of possibility, yes. This person that you have in mind could be riding a horse on the Kennedy Road at this moment. And so this is within the realm of possibility. So you have an idea in mind which can exist in the real world, and the possibility of existence is there. But then go back to your mind. Just come up with a formula in your mind. 2 plus 2 is equal to 5. And the people will say it can't happen. You'll say, well, it happened in my mind. Yes, as a mental picture, you can have 2 plus 2 is equal to 5. Or for example, we can have other examples, day and night. You can just say, I thought about it, and they can exist at the same time, same place. Or a person, I can imagine a person standing and sitting at the same time, same place, same moment. Now these are ideas which will only remain in the mind. It can never have existence in the reality outside. And that is what we call impossible. Mumtani'ul wujud. Means its wujud, its existence is impossible. Whereas the earlier example was mumkinul wujud. Its existence is possible. Now, when we say shay, وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, as Muslims, do we mean everything which is mumkinul wujud, or are we also including things which are mumtani'ul wujud? When we say Allah can do, has power to do everything, the term shay, thing, applies for things which can really exist, and the possibility of existence of such things are there. We are not even talking about those things that we are just imaging about it and which are mumtani'ul wujud. Now, actually this and this are not working together anyway. These guys are working from that side. Salawat padne ek baar aur. Maybe we should go back to the old system. Okay. Can God create another God? Now when we talk about it, go to the second line. Oh, okay. This is the right button. When we say God, God by definition is eternal. Eternal means He is without a beginning. He always existed. Now, repeat the question. Can God create another God? Is there a problem in that question? Definitely. There is a problem in the question itself, because you are asking God to create a God who has no beginning. If He is going to be a created God, how can you have God? And so that is mumtani'ul wujud is impossible. And so really you don't have to worry about it that much. Being eternal and being created are opposites. They are contradictions. And so there is a contradiction in the question in itself when they say, can God create another God? Because God by definition has to be eternal without a beginning. And when you say He creates, that's already a beginning has been fixed for that second God. And so this is rationally an impossible issue. Now let's go to the second one. Another example. Can God create a rock that He can't lift? Everything which is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He is the creator, He has absolute knowledge and power of it. Remember the ayat yesterday we discussed? Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, عِنْدَهُ مَفَاتِحُ الْغَيْبِ, to Him belongs the keys of the unseen, لَا يَعْلَمُهُ إِلَّا هُوَ, nobody knows but Him. ما في البر والبحر وما تسقط من ورقة إلا يعلمها. There is nothing in the land or the sea, not even a leaf which falls down from the tree, but that He knows it. Not only that, there is nothing, whatever is there, even the seed in the darkness and the depth of the earth, and everything which is dry and wet on this planet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows it. And knowledge is power. And so if it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who is going to create a rock, He has absolute power and control over it. And so when we talk about it, rationally it's impossible for God to create a rock that He cannot lift, because whatever He creates is His creation, And because it is His creation, He has knowledge and power over it. So this whole issue of whether He can create a rock that He cannot lift is rationally an impossible question. These questions are not really new. A person had come to Amir al-Mu'mineen and asked this question. He put it in a more interesting way. He said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, can your Lord put the world into an egg without shrinking the world or enlarging the egg? Let us look at the concept of possibility and impossibility. There are one possibility, one scenario would be shrinking one or enlarging the other. This is within the realm of imkan and possibility, isn't it? So Allah can shrink the earth and put in the egg, or enlarge the egg and put the world into it. So this is a possibility. But what about putting a large body into a small one without shrinking or enlarging one or the other? Rationally, this is impossible. And this is in the realm of mumtani'ul wujud. This cannot happen. So the first option can happen when you say that, can your Lord put the world into an egg without shrinking the earth or enlarging the egg? You know, as far as shrinking is concerned, yes, He can do that. Or enlarging one other item, He can do that. But when you're asking that He put the earth into the egg without shrinking one or enlarging the other, this is in the realm of mumtani'ul wujud. It cannot happen. Because they are, one is small, one is big. And you cannot put them in one place together. And that is where Amir al-Mu'mineen responded by saying that إن الله تبارك وتعالى لا ينسب إلى العجز. You cannot relate weakness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِي سَأَلْتَنِي لَا يَكُونُ. But what you have asked me can never happen. Ajz and weakness is only when something was possible and He couldn't do it, then you will say Allah is not powerful. And so you have to understand this concept of what is mumkin, what is aqlan mahal, as we call it, rationally impossible. Salawat Pranik Barar. Let us now move on to the second ayat. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. After talking about His power, Tabarak alladhi biyadihi al-mulk, blessed is the one who has absolute control over the kingdom. Wa huwa ala kulli shayin qadir, and He has power over everything. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts to give example of His power. And the very first thing He talks about is the creation of the human beings. الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور. That He is the one who created death and life, so that He may test you to see who among you is the best in conduct, أحسن عملا, and He is the mighty and the forgiving. Let us look at, these sentences separately. The first one, الذي خلق الموت والحياة. Allah is the one who created death. This is where we come to realize, unlike some in the world of philosophy who say maut is adami, where they say death is not a reality, it's just absence of life. We would have a problem in the Islamic philosophy with that, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word khalaqa. In another ayat He says qaddara, He decreed. And so for us, death is actually creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is not total end of the existence of the human being. It is actually, and that's why we believe that this is makhluk of Allah. Maut is a khalq of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what it means, maut basically means transfer from one life to another. It's not end of the process. Yes, it is absence of the life in this world, but it actually goes into the life in barzakh. And from there we move on to the life in the hereafter. And so this is where we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this concept of maut is transfer. And so it's not a total annihilation of a person, it's just a relatively, you will left this dunya, now you're going to the next world. Actually, this is where the issue of should we fear death becomes very easy if we understand the meaning of maut. In Urdu and Arabic, we use the word intiqal, which is very, very appropriate for the concept of death, which means transfer from one realm to another, from dunya to barzakh, and from barzakh to akhirah. Rumi talks about it when he says, that death actually, in his mystical way of putting things, he says, talking about Adam, that Adam was created from the earth. And so he's talking about a human being in general, not a specific person. He says, I was a turab, I was earth, inanimate object. And I died from that inorganic state and became endowed with growth, which is vegetable. And then I died as a vegetable and became an animal, where I have mobility. And then I died from the state of being an animal and became alive as a human being. And one day, he says, and one day I'm going to die as a human being. And so he says, when have I become less by dying from one state to another? It is intiqal, it is not end. I'm actually gaining and moving from one level to the higher level. And then he says, when I die as a human being, I might be raised and lift to the level that I will lift my head amongst the angels. But that's not even the end of it. He says, then maybe I will die again and reach to a point where I get the qurbat and nearness of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat upon the Akbar. Now the question comes up, why death has been mentioned first? I use this ayat when I talk about many of these majalis tarhim, and I always put this question, that if this was a human being who wrote this book and they would given it to me for editing, I would immediately use my editorial pen, the red one, to say there is a wrong sequence of the words here. It shouldn't be الذي خلق الموت والحياة. It should be الذي خلق الحياة والموت. Because life comes first and death comes later on. But no, there is no mistake in this typing here or in the Quran itself. There is no need for any editor to come and change it. This is the way it has come down. And the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions maut before hayat, death before life, is to emphasize the purpose of this dunya. You have not been sent here to stay forever. Even from the day you were born, the stamp of death was there on you. The angel was told when you are going to die, even before the day you were born. And so this is the concept for us to realize, focus on death and the purpose of life, because we have not been created for this dunya, we have been created for the hereafter. And then there is next sentence in that ayat, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create maut and hayat, death and life? What is the purpose of our existence in this dunya? Very beautifully, just 4 words. لِيَبْلُؤُكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, so that He may test you who among you is best in conduct. And so the purpose of life basically is to test us here. And what does it mean when we talk about the concept of test? Basically, test is done in order to bring out the potential which is within you. It's only when you are put under test that your real worth shines out. There's sometimes I use the example, if you buy a new spade, a brand new one, and just put them on the hanger in the garage, never use it, it will gather dust and become rusted. But if you constantly use it, the end of the spade will always be sharp and shiny. So the more you are put into the situation of test, that's where your real strength from inside would manifest. And that is the purpose. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that we have the potential to attain worthiness for the salvation in the hereafter. And that is where ibtila and imtihan comes in. That is where test and trial comes in. And then he says, I would like to test and see who among you is ahsanu amala, best in conduct. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's very important. He doesn't say aktharu amala, who does many more deeds. No, he is saying ahsan. Ahsan means the one who is best. Allah is not looking at the quantity of the good deeds. He is looking for the quality of good deeds. And this is where we have to realize that in order to gain salvation in the hereafter, it is the quality of amal saleh which counts more. Just a couple of ahadith on this issue. One is from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. When he was asked the meaning of this ayat, وَلَيَبْلُوكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, he uses very powerful words. He says, what does it mean? أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَقْلًا, somebody who is at a higher level of aql. أَتَمُّكُمْ عَقْلًا means somebody who is doing the good deeds with full comprehension of what it is. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expect from me? أَشَدُّكُمْ لِلَّهِ خَوْفًا, somebody who has higher level of khawf and fear of displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أَحْسَنُكُمْ فِي مَا أَمَرَ بِهِ وَنَهَى عَنْهُ نَظَرًا, somebody who has better insight into what is allowed by Allah and what has been forbidden by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is the knowledge level with good deeds which elevates the quality of the good deed. وَإِنْ كَانَ أَقَلُّكُمْ تَطَوُّعًا, the Prophet says, even if such a person didn't have so many mustahab and sunnat amal, just did few things, but with full understanding and with the true spirit, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted him to do. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wa salam again explains the same ayat in slightly different way. He says, it doesn't mean aktharukum amalan, those among you who do many good deeds. وَلَكِنْ أَصْوَبُكُمْ عَمَلًا, somebody who does the good deeds in the right way. And what is the right way? He says it is an action which is done with a fear of displeasing Allah and with sincere intention. Intention actually gives value to the good deeds. Good deeds in Islam by themselves are neutral. They don't really have any implication unless it is supported by sincere intention and niyyat. And therefore the Imam says, al-iqbal ala al-amal, al-ibqa ala al-amal hatta yukhlasa ashaddu min al-amal. He says doing a good deed is very easy, but maintaining that in your credit with the accounts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is difficult. You might do something sincerely, but after a few days or weeks, you talk about it, brag about it. I did this and that. Already the quality of your good deed done in the past has gone down because you propagated about it. And this is where the Imam basically says, النية أفضل من العمل, that the niyyat of an action is more important than the action itself. ألا وإن النية هي العمل. He says, verily, the niyyat is actually the good deed. And we alhamdulillah are going through the month of Ramadan. If you see this concept reinforced in the a'mal of fasting, the niyyat is very important. It should continue. If you interrupt the niyyat, means your intention is to fast from Fajr till Maghrib. If in between you do the intention which is contrary to that, then it becomes mumtani' al-wujud to have both together. You can't have it the niyat of fasting and the niyat of doing something which violates the fast. And so when you do that niyat, your roza becomes batil even if you didn't do the action. Let me give you an example, and don't be scared. You're already hungry by evening. Iftar is being made in the kitchen. You feel the good smell. You have the longing to eat because you're hungry. That longing and desire is okay. But if you are so much overcome and say, oh, I'll go and eat. I'll pay kafara, doesn't matter. When you do that niyat, I'm going to eat, and by the time you reach to the kitchen, your wife shows you the knife. And you go back. And you don't eat. Because you already did the niyat of breaking the fast, your niyat is interrupted, your roza becomes batil. You will have to do the qaza. There is no kafara in that case. Because you didn't do it. But the niyat was interrupted. And that's very important when we talk about the niyat. And when it comes to fasting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really likes this than any other good deed. Because when we do namaz, we do something. Even if we do it with the best of intention, there is possibility of showing off. When we give charity, we are doing something. The chances of riyah and showing off is more. When we, for example, go for Hajj, we are doing something. All good deeds, we do things. But in fasting of Ramadan, what do? You don't do anything. And so there's no chance of showing, you could be hungry, but it doesn't show on your face. Okay, unless you make it very depressed face, that's a different thing. But you can't show you are fasting. And therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Hadith Qudsi from the Prophet says, As-sawmu li wa ana ajzi bihi. Fasting is for me. And therefore I myself am going to reward those who fast. I'm not going to use the malaika for that. Because of the element of sincerity which is there in this good deed known as fasting. So remember, when we talk about the good deeds, according to Quran, the purpose is that so that Allah may test us to see who is best in conduct. And the best in conduct is the one who is most sincere in what he or she is doing. I think we are Shia of Ali, and for us, look at the example of what happened in Khandaq. We still have about 7 minutes, don't worry. I can take you till iftar so you don't worry about food. In Khandaq, the ditch was dug so that the Meccan and allied forces cannot come this side. However, there was one area where it was narrower, and Amr ibn Abdawud and some of his companions jumped over with their horse. And Amr ibn Abdawud was known as a warrior equal to 100 or 1,000 warriors. And the people were afraid. And he comes and challenges the Muslim, Hal min Mubariz, is there anyone to come and respond to my challenge? Nobody stood up. According to Tabari, the Muslim historian, he says the Muslims were sitting كأنهم على رؤوسهم الطير, as if a bird was sitting on their head. They didn't want to disturb it. So they were just like statues, not moving at all. Only Amir al-Mu'minin stood up. Rasulullah told him, sit down. 3 times Amr challenged. It is only the 3rd time that Rasulullah allowed Ali to go. Amir al-Mu'minin goes there. He took his Zulfiqar. After the attack that they attacked one another, Amir al-Mu'minin got injured actually on his head. But eventually he was able to bring Amr down from his horse, sat on him to finish him off. At that moment, Amr ibn Abdawud, the most courageous warrior of the Arab world those days, to save his own life, spat on the blessed face of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen for a moment got up, took few steps, and then came back. I don't know how many seconds it took or how many minutes for him to leave and then come back. In the meanwhile, the Muslims got worried. What is he doing? And so Rasulullah said, you go and ask him when he comes back. And when he was asked, why did you do this? This is where he says that when he spat on my face, there was a human element anyway. He says, for a moment I became angry. And I did not want my anger to be part of the motivation of killing him. I wanted to do this only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore I got up, calmed myself down, and then I went and finished my job only for the sake of qurbat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why you understand the words of Rasulullah after that when he said, ضربة علي يوم الخندق أفضل من عبادة الثقلين. That one strike of Ali in Khandaq is more worthier in the eyes of Allah than all the acts of worship of the jinn and the human beings put together. It wasn't the quantity, it was the quality of the sincerity and ikhlas of Amir al-Mu'mineen which brought that action to that level. Salawat padne ek baar. Let us end this ayat with the last words, وَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الْغَفُورُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I created the death and life so that I may test you to see who among you is the best in conduct. And then He says, He is the mighty and forgiving. Al-Aziz is, which means Allah is powerful, the mighty. And the word has been used there to reflect that He has the ability to resurrect you on the day of Qiyamah, because when He's going to test you, after test there will be consequences. So there will be judgment, and there will be resurrection. And He is powerful. بِيَدِهِ الْمُلْكِ. In His hand is the power and the kingdom. So He will resurrect you and judge you. But then He says something which is, these words don't go together. Al-Aziz on one side, the powerful, the mighty, and Al-Ghafur, the forgiving. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't want us to lose hope that just because He is powerful, He is going to be very strict with us. Yes, but He says Al-Ghafur, He is also forgiving, and therefore you try your best to earn the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that is the issue, keeping the fear of Allah's displeasure on one side and hope in the forgiveness and rahmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the other side. If we keep that together, then we will have a balanced perspective of life from the Quranic point of view. It's also a message for us that if we become powerful, have a position or money, always remember that Allah is Aziz, but He's also a Ghafur. Be kind and merciful and lenient with those who are under your jurisdiction and control. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Just 1 minute, and there is a chart I had prepared and distributed at the JCC on Saturday, which basically talks about the issues of qaza, which talks about qaza, fidya, and kafara. We have copies out for each family on gents and ladies' side also. Basically, it's a very simple thing. Summary of the discussion I had actually on Thursday night. And it tells you different situation, elderly people, old people, temporary illness, long-term illness, pregnancy, nursing mother, and then the issue of even travelers, where qaza is there, where qaza is not there, where fidya will apply, where fidya doesn't apply, where kafara applies. Because there's a lot of confusion among people about difference between fidya and kafara. So take a copy and read that. If you have any questions, my number is there, my email is there. I'm here in the evenings, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.